you don't need to have a program to start making disciples. Don't overthink it. Just grab some people that you find, okay, we have some common interest in, and I have suddenly an access to their life, and obviously they have access to my life. You can start discipling them. You speak truth in their life, because, man, the gospel is such good news.
People hear that and go like, well, what curriculum should I use? And that's not what you're talking about.
No.
You're talking about helping them move from unbelief to belief in light of the good news of the gospel in everything. So start doing that. It's amazing what God will do through that, even without loads of curriculum.
Yeah. If the persecuted church can do it in Iran or Afghanistan or China, why would we overthink?
Yeah, we don't need to.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily make it better. In fact, it usually doesn't.
Welcome to the Everyday Disciple podcast, where you'll learn how to live with greater intentionality and an integrated faith that naturally fits into every area of life. In other words, discipleship as a lifestyle. This is the stuff your parents, pastors, and seminary professors probably forgot to tell you. And now, here's your host, Caesar Kalinowski.
All right, so this is going to be probably the most raw episode of the Everyday Disciple podcast ever. I am literally on the road. I'm here in Brussels with my brother Dennis and a whole bunch of awesome disciple makers. And it's been an amazing week so far of teaching.
Yeah, we're having a blast.
And this organization is called Recruits. And I am just going straight into it because I'm on the road and I didn't want to skip. I wanted to be with y'all, but I wanted to talk to Dennis and let you hear a little bit about what their ministry's doing here in Belgium. And it's expanding, and it's really encouraging, and I think it's going to encourage all of you as well. So we're just going to have a discussion, and then when it gets to the big three today, we're probably just going to summarize that live too. So here you are, Everyday Disciple, as everyday and as raw as it gets. So Dennis, just tell us a little bit first of your story, you and Guile, and where you are in life, and kids, and marriage, and just all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, Guile and you met like 12 years ago, 13 years ago, got married 3 years later, because we were still in high school when we met, so you need money to get married.
Yeah.
I know how
Tina
marriages
and I
go.
met in high school too. Yeah.
So 3 years later we got married, and we have 4 kids now. I've been in youth ministry since we met. Been leading that for 8 years, and then suddenly God called us into the whole new discipleship movement that was going on here called Recruits. And we've been part of it ever since. So our kids are growing up in this community of amazing young men and women. Yeah.
Beautiful that the kids are growing up thinking this is normal.
Yeah.
To have people around, discipleship as a lifestyle, right? I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Recruits started when?
In 2014.
Okay.
So this one guy, Matthias, shout out to him because he did an amazing job, but he was one of the leaders at a camp. And a couple of guys who went to camp every year, man, every time we go to camp, our hearts are full and on fire. But then 2 weeks later after camp, we go back into normal. We don't want that to
like an evangelistic camp or something?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No problem.
And they came up to him like, can you teach us, can you mentor us, how to follow Jesus, not only to have that fire here just in camp, but also in everyday life. And Matthias was like, yeah, let's do it. And just to make a long story short.
Sure.
So one group of guys, 7 young men, just going off to college, every week came together in a small room in the heart of Brussels. And then the next year, I think there were 5 groups or 4 groups. And after that, it expanded. So
is the way that those Recruits groups were put together, does it build multiplication right into it then?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the commitments they have to make. We do this, but with the intentionality of passing it on to somebody else. We cannot just come here as a consumer. We also have to raise others to do the same. So we are disciples who are making disciples.
Yeah, I love that that's sort of built into it, right? And I think that's a normal assumption. However, the way I was discipled originally, it was here's your 9 lessons, and you're done, and you're a disciple.
Yeah.
And then, but you're not mature enough yet to take somebody else through this, or it was real, kind of once and done, or you did the 101, 201, 301, 401 class, and I guess you're a disciple now. You
Yeah.
know,
Or you get baptized and the church thinks, oh yeah, he's one of us now, so he's good.
he's in.
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Just these sermons,
Yeah.
you know, a couple
Oh,
times a
yeah.
month, that'll get it done.
Oh yeah.
So I love that it's built in. That's the assumption.
Yeah.
Just like I think with our kids, you know, you have an assumption we're going to raise them to probably have a family someday.
Yeah.
And move out and be adults and live a great life. And so.
Yeah, they're gonna grow up anyway, so you better put in your heart so that you
Yeah.
make something out of it. So
Yeah. So then how did you get connected to Recruits?
yeah, so Matthias and I were both a guest speaker on a huge evangelistic conference.
Okay.
And they kind of set us up like, hey, meet with each other so you can have like a talk. How Matthias is gonna preach sermon A, and you're gonna do like the follow up sermon B.
So get together.
So we got together.
work
That's
that
the
out.
first time that we met. I think the second time, but that's the first time that we really got close and could connect with one another. I think we talked about 5 minutes about the sermon, and then talked about discipleship and everything around it for the next 4 hours. And he was telling me about the things that he was reading and discovering, and that God was showing him. And that's when my heart connected with the Great Commission. I didn't even know there was a Great Commission until that point. And I've been in church, since forever.
You're teaching and preaching, and you're still not following a Great Commission.
Yeah,
What's the point here?
Yeah, I knew Matthew 28 and something, but that it is called the Great Commission, and that's something for us, the church, to do and to live out as a mission given from Jesus. I had no clue until that point.
Wow.
So he connected me with that, and Google, you just search up things, and the big transformation that happened in my heart was a book written by David Platt called Radical, and one of his 5 challenges was you either start a DMM, so a disciple-making movement, or join one. I'm like, yeah, well, that one is happening already. And I told Matthias, I'm in 100%. Like, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to do it? And yeah, that's
So I'm going to make an assumption here, and if I'm wrong, let me know, okay? But if at this point you know the word, you're an adult, you've been in church forever, and you're just now waking up to the implication and the fullness of the Great Commission, go and make disciples, fill the world with God's glory, then I'm guessing you probably had not been deeply discipled yourself.
not at all. Not at all. So that's what I mean. Like, you get baptized and oh yeah, he's one of us now. That's okay. He's saved. And that did not stroke with my feeling. I'm like, man, I'm reading in the Bible, like Joshua had a Moses, Elijah had an Elijah. I mean, like, what's up? Like the 12 disciples had Jesus.
Yeah.
And they had disciples. Like, I mean, look at Paul.
Yeah.
So what's going on there? And I asked God for a mentor, and he mentored me really hard. He's a theologian, a PhD, so I got really discipled
Matthias?
into head knowledge. No, not Matthias. He's an older guy, but not that much older. But smart guy, amazing heart. So I got really a lot of knowledge and tools and skills.
Yeah.
But to disciple and to be discipled is something way different, because you give entrance to your life when you're discipling somebody.
Yeah.
Or the other way around. You
Right.
get entrance in somebody's life.
It really is a life
Yeah.
on life together.
Yeah.
And it's a lifestyle for sure. We talk about that a lot. We have an overlap in our stories there because for me, one of the things that God did, and I've probably talked about this on the podcast before, when I was traveling overseas quite a bit doing missions, right? But not making disciples at home, but going to do missions, which the mission is discipleship. But anyway, the Spirit of God started always like calling me to read the book of Acts during this trip. And then I did it so many times, so many trips, it kind of became my thing. Like when I go overseas, I read the book of Acts. Yeah. And I started noticing these parallels between the way the church was, like in the bush, in Africa, in Burma during the war, you know, all over, Thailand, you know. It was like all this stuff, and you're like, oh man, the church, they're being the church. They're not really putting on much church services because they don't, you know, it's a war, they don't have buildings, they barely have food, you know. And it looks just like the book of Acts. Like it really did, you know, like when I'm reading and I'm looking at how Jesus spent time with his disciples, I'm like, that's what they're doing. And then we'd come home and we were putting on church.
Wow.
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
And so that same thing is like, God, where do I get to do this? Do we? Who's going to do this with us?
Yeah, that was actually a question I have for you. So when did you like now my heart is connected to this discipleship and being on mission and as a community. Like you were in the church, you grew up in the church.
Yeah.
When did that all shifted? How do you remember? Can you recall?
Well, a big part of that shift was doing all this international travel, and then I would come home, and I would feel the difference, and I'd go, "Wow, I want to live like that. I want to live like they did. Like we got to live with them all week. You know, they let us, right? We were being the church instead of going to church." And then I'd come home and we were putting on church. And, you know, and it was wonderful and it was big and it was a lot of people, but it wasn't the same in many ways. It wasn't the same. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I was longing for like this family, oikos, mission as the church, people as the church, living it out day to day, super connected. And so that was around 2003 or so that was really starting to hit our hearts hard. And it was in 2004 when finally God showed us, like, I'm moving you to Tacoma. We had our friends there, Jeff and Janie Vanderstelt, and they were just getting a handful of people together to talk about this lifestyle too. And we said, we got to join them. You know? And so then Tina and I had to go back to Chicago area there and both quit and say, hey, we love you, but guess what? You know,
was that a hard conversation?
You know, I can remember it pretty clearly. I called up the XP, the executive pastor. He kind of ran all the staff.
Executive pastor.
Oh, there's so many staff. It was huge. It's an organization, right? And I called him up, and his name is John. And I said, John, and this is how exactly the Spirit of God led me to bring this up. I said, we have been given a great opportunity by God. And he goes, what's that? Yeah. And I said, the opportunity that God has given us is that Tina and I are to go and start to plant churches and make disciples in community, like much like I've been talking about, we see on these trips, and people live in this way. And what should we do about this? Because I was trying to get their buy-in, right? And he was like, I don't know. We better talk to the senior pastor right away if you're leaving, because I was super entrenched in the staff, you know? I was one of the lead team, and I had multiple departments I was running, and production was one of them, and that was, everything lived and died by that production, right? And so we went and talked to him and said, so we have this opportunity, you know? And he was like, these are the words he said. He said, our dog is not in that hunt.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? I'm making disciples? Well, no, we're here doing this, and if you want to do that, and then you get to do that. But I said, well, we're family, and we've been here for 12 years and serving faithfully. Can we be helped to go do this? And they're like, nah, that's okay.
Oh, wow.
So there was no sense.
Oh, that's so hard.
So that was hard.
Wow.
So, but it wasn't an antagonistic conversation per se.
Yeah.
But there was some of this where like, well, what's wrong? What are you doing different? What's wrong with what we're doing? I said, well, we're not looking to put on church services right away. We want to go make disciples, however long that takes, and then we'll regather those, right?
Yeah.
And then multiply those communities. And I remember the senior pastor said, it'll never work.
Yeah.
I said, why not? He goes, because you'll never multiply preachers fast enough. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, it all lives and dies by the preacher. And I knew he believed that because he was the preacher.
Yeah.
But I never thought he'd say it out loud.
Wow. Yeah.
And I love this guy, and he's a wonderful man, and he's a wonderful preacher. But that was his perspective on, if you're going to multiply the church, well, you multiply out that pulpit.
Yeah.
Right?
All right.
And that's an aspect of it, but that certainly is not. And then again, we were discipleship focused. So we're like, the only thing we need to multiply out is how many dinner tables we can get going. You know? And when we gather, we did it all kinds of wacky places, you know, warehouses and in parks and coffee shops at night, or whatever it took, you know. That didn't matter. People didn't care where we gathered. It's just that we did. And so, anyway, so that's how that shifted for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Now, how about you in your church experience? You're working with recruits now, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how those groups look in a minute. But did that shift your own experience of going to church over time?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because I'm guessing, did you ever work for a church?
No. So in Belgium, we don't have many full-timers or staff on church. So I was doing a full-time job as a volunteer, and I had my paid job.
Okay, sure.
So I didn't work for a church, but it shifted my view on how church could be. I'm like, before that, you look at the huge mega churches as like your role model, and you try to attract people to the institution and the program that's on Sunday. And I love the church. I grew up in it. I have given so many chances by it. But when that discipleship heart of mine got formed, I was like, man, we are missing so much here. what's it that we can do? So I was in the church, I'm like talking about this with so many leaders, my peers on youth ministry, and my view on how we gather kind of changed. I loved it. I loved going in because I love the people over there.
Yeah.
Man, it's more than just Sunday.
Right. And that's how it was for us too.
Yeah.
And we had been at this church 12 years.
Yeah.
Deep relationships. It was hard to leave from that standpoint. But the call to go and be the church and make disciples was so much stronger. And after having tried a bunch of stuff, we knew that church we were in was never really going to fully go that way. Yeah. And they had small groups, but the small groups pretty much studied the sermon on Sunday, and then they took the summers off. Yeah. And some of them only met once a month, and it just wasn't like a family on a mission together. Yeah. And we tried that, like with our closest friends, people we had known for years, and they were all, that sounds amazing. Yeah. But then when we tried to live it, like, but we're too busy. You know?
Oh yeah. And they don't see like how everything can fit into their busy life.
Yeah.
So
let's go back just a little bit. I want to talk about what the recruits, like these groups that you form and multiply to make discipleship, disciples and start. And I know this is changing too.
Yeah.
Like you guys are iterating and moving forward. I love that. So tell me a little bit about that. How do the groups form? And you've obviously led some of these groups now, but how do they get started?
Yeah. So we just had a session on the person of peace. Mm-hmm. So that's how we try to engage for starting a new group.
Let me just explain what he means. What we just had. Yeah. So I've been here with Tina training all week with a bunch of the recruits and their leaders. It's been wonderful. And so we just had a big deep dive into finding people of peace and what that looks like and how to identify them and where are they and all that.
Yeah, so when we find that person of peace, we try to connect with them and their oikos, so the people that they're closest with. And we ask them like, this is what we do and why we do it. Do you know anybody that you might be interested in joining us? Yeah. So we form these new groups every, I would say, a year. Okay. And we do this by following the biggest command, like the Pharisees that challenged Jesus. What's the biggest command? Mm. And Jesus says, love the Lord with all your mind, all your soul, all your strength, and all your whole heart. Yeah. So we go through these 4 loving phases. Mm. So Jesus is king, so we have to surrender our whole mind. Jesus is king, so also our soul needs to be surrendered to him, but also all our skills and the things that we do out of our own strength. Mm. And then most importantly, our heart, where actually our identity is enrooted. So that's what we try to do. I say try because not everybody always picks it up.
Or they learn it in their head and it doesn't quite make it to their heart. Yeah.
And then the time comes when they start their own groups, and then suddenly it's too hard or life gets too busy. They back out of it. So that's the story. But as you can see, we have 130 people over here, fully booked. A lot of kids also over here. Yeah. There are people who are grasping it, and we've been expanding ever since 2014. It's
so amazing. I know you went from one group to like a lot of groups. Now, how many groups are running this year?
Oh, I have absolutely no idea. We have 45 in my region alone. So
so a lot. That's so beautiful, brother. And I know there's been some growing of that to go like, hey, some of this is accidentally becoming more of like a church together, and all that. Yeah. But before we go there, like it's a little bit of a tease for everybody, but what I know I'm going to ask a question that's impossible to answer. Not like on the average, but what would be some typical timelines of someone who maybe comes into recruits? They're a person of peace, they're interested, they're learning, you're discipling them, you're starting to do more life together. How long might it be before someone like that would actually start to form and pull their own recruits group together?
Man,
is that right away, like within that year, or not necessarily, or is it years later?
Some people like pick it up after 3 months, and some people like you do life with them for 2 years until they finally start to figure out, oh man, actually I am already discipling a couple of guys. I just never knew that I was doing it in a way that I'm designed to do it. So gotcha. It's always hard. Like if you have a strong personality as a leader, that's a good thing, but that can be a trap. Sure. So people look at you and they think, oh, I have to do it exactly like that. Right. And that's not the case because God made us so uniquely and so cool
Yeah.
So everybody has his own uniqueness to bring in and actually disciple others.
Yeah.
And to show them.
Which means no
Jesus.
two are going to look the same exactly.
No, and I hope not.
And how they start. And that, you know, what you said, like sometimes a strong leader, that can be a bit of a detriment because people think I have to do exactly like them, and I never could.
Yeah.
And that's been part of my, not to like say I'm the strongest leader in the world, but that's been part of my challenge, is to make sure that I'm always breaking things down.
Yeah.
That's probably why we do this podcast and so much of the training we offer. It breaks it all down into really bite-sized, starting with identity, basic steps of things, because I don't want it to be that way. And because we accidentally did that in the beginning too, when we were first starting Soma communities, like us and the Vanderstelts, we had no problem gathering a crowd, and we were discipling people to maturity, and they were getting baptized, and others started trying to do it, but they only wanted to do exactly what we did. And then some of them could if we were like that next generation, but once they got another generation away, they couldn't see the original, so then they didn't know what to copy, and then they get burned out on it. You know, it didn't flow naturally from identity through a process that they could totally make their own, you know, in everyday life. So that was something we had to learn too.
Yeah, and you can explain that to the groups, but only when they move it from their head to their hearts and make the mission of Jesus their own. Then you see a shift. If they think, oh, I have to do this because I have this leader, like I have Caesar showing it to me and Caesar telling it to me that I have to do it this way, no, that's not gonna work.
Yeah. So now I know, since we've met, you and I are in coaching right together. You're in coaching with Tina and I, you and Gal. What a blast that's been so far. We're loving that. And I feel like we're learning just as much from you guys. What has been shifting in the last 6 months or so? Maybe it's longer, I don't know. Because I know you guys have started to have like a home church gathering, and it's like your recruits groups have kind of grown into something fuller, bigger. I don't know, how would you describe it? What's changing?
Oh, yeah, that's a story on its own. But when we moved last year, and this was the first time that we were really convinced God is placing us somewhere with a purpose, and we were trying to figure out what, because in our eyes it wasn't even strategically correct. Because
where you moved, you mean?
Yeah, because all recruit groups were around us, and a lot of young couples. So we're like, there are a lot of Christians over there who doing the discipleship making. Why are we moving there? But as soon as we moved, like the first day, people were coming over. Help us unpack the boxes. So you're here anyway. Like you want to grab a cup of coffee and like try to find them in the boxes. So and that never stopped. And my wife, she's an amazing cook. And she just started to make food for everybody who comes over. She makes extra if she knows, Dennis's boys, the group is coming here. I'll make extra. You never know.
You never know, right?
And then suddenly it dawned to us, like, wait, we're actually being a church. We don't have the songs, the 3 worship songs, and then the 3 like really spiritual connecting songs and the sermon. But man, we're doing life together. And now we're trying to figure out how we can multiply that. Like, you want to have a DNA. You don't want to have it like a really loose cannon,
right?
Because you want to make an impact on your neighborhood. You want to have that effect in acts, like, or people are all for you, or they want to drag you through court because hey, those guys are
throw you off a cliff.
I have to think of that I don't know how to say it in English, but a guy who was in Ephesus screaming, "Great is the goddess Artemis," because he's like, these guys have come here. We don't make any money now, like. Right. So that's the impact that you want to have on your neighborhood, because wow, Jesus comes and He is Lord. He's truly Lord. So we're trying to like figure out how we can multiply this in a healthy way.
I love the easiness of which this sort of started to form beyond a discipleship group, which you're multiplying those, that's great. I think it's maybe, I'm just going to say something, you and I haven't talked about. I think maybe it's just been God's design. You have been making disciples first, and you've learned how to multiply those groups, and those are changing even how you do that, and they're fuller and fuller. And now some are going to be morphing into a fuller expression of church, right? But I think because so many of us have come from a background of, you start a church service, that's how you plant a church, and then you repot Christians, because that's who comes to a new church service, right? Think about it, like, and then And then you try to talk them into going and making disciples. Much like our experience, you guys have kind of accidentally slid into doing it upside down. We learned how to start making disciples, but we knew there was more, and life on life started to happen naturally. And because you opened your home and you didn't worry about like, well, do we have to have 3 songs? Should it be 4? Do we need announcements at the end? Should we get a screen? Should we get a pulpit like, in our house? You just let it be the church. It's natural and it's lightweight.
Yeah.
And so I think it will be very reproducible. Again, looking very, very different from church to church, right?
Yeah.
And it should. When we read about the church in the New Testament, it's always referred to as the oikos at this person's house or the oikos in this city or whatever. I know they weren't following a plan book, They didn't have like, this is the order of service, and make sure you get a psalm stuck in here exactly at 11 minutes in. And
with the shots of wine.
with the little plastic cup. Get the plastic. We haven't even invented plastic yet, but the church did, Anyway, so I love the simplicity and the naturalness and the ease that you guys have. You're not stressing it. You're not, yet, you entered into coaching because you're still learning and you're trying to put some more processes of reproducibility in.
Yeah.
And our stuff's pretty flexible. That's the point, right? So that it can be reproduced in a million ways. So I love that it's easy. You're not stressing out over this. You're not striving over it.
And that's not in my design. I'm the guy that wants to have a program and here are your 12 steps to go to the next level.
Yeah.
So this organic way of gathering is so freeing, and it's a whole new experience. So it's so amazing, the journey we're on right now.
I love it. I think some people would say, well, that's not really fully church yet. But I want to remind them, because you don't have a building, or you don't have elders, or you don't have a presbytery, or you don't have a district, or, all these things.
Yeah, or an executive pastor.
And so, but I want to remind them to go back and look at the book of Acts and look at all the epistles and how long the church was multiplying out oikoses before any elders were appointed. They never had a church building, ever, not anywhere in the book. It didn't happen, Well, what about the Hall of Tyrannus? Well, that was a place that Paul was using to train disciple makers. You know what I mean? He wasn't holding church services there. They never said that. So I think what you're doing is church, and it's a beautiful representation of it. You know where I felt like we had some church yesterday? Like a whole, quote, church service happened? Yeah. I was invited to do the story of God with some of the kids.
Oh, yeah, that was so cool.
And so we just did the very first story. It had to be translated, because I speak English and those kids didn't. Nope. But it was all beautiful. We're sitting around on the carpets and chairs and just laying on the floor, and it was natural. We did the first story, and angels watching God as he's creating the foundations of the earth, Lucifer deceiving the angels, him and the demons being cast down to earth out of God's presence. We talked about it. The kids were amazing. They had all these ideas. They noticed things that I've never seen. I was like, that's amazing. And they had what things they were wondering about, and they had questions. And then I read a short psalm.
Yeah.
I said, here, kids, this is a verse from the Bible. It's from Psalm 8, verse 1. And maybe you could memorize this with your parents, and that'll hide this story in your heart. And so we read it, and then they translated it. And one girl says, oh, we have a song that says that exactly. And then someone hopped on a keyboard, and we sang that song a few times. And it was wonderful, and then everybody cheered, and it was crazy. Yeah. And I was like, wait a minute, like what it says in Scripture, they came together, they shared what they had. We'd all just had lunch, and everybody had a word, and they shared the stories, and there was psalms and hymns. Yeah. And, and I was like, oh my gosh, how hard was this? There was nothing planned. No. It was beautiful. And everybody's been talking about it since, because it was just so pure and perfect. And we learned and it felt closer, and I loved it, man.
And it was so cool that song actually came from the kids. So it was nothing that the adults set up for them. It was by them.
Yeah, we didn't plan it.
No. No. That's a good thing. That was so awesome.
So, and I left going like, it's not any harder than that in my home or living room, right? It shouldn't be. It doesn't need to be. And it was just that beautiful. And I think some of that's the power of story, and learning the word that way. However, so what are some of it's free to dream. What are some of your hopes and dreams for the next, say, year as a family and as a growing, home church or church body now? Yeah. And for recruits, what are some of your hopes and dreams? We can be praying for you too as a community.
Next year, oh man, a lot can happen in a year.
I know. Don't worry about it too technically. Just what are you hoping for?
Oh man, just that people that are in recruits and doing life with each other, just find that family to do mission with, just to have that higher calling that's called the kingdom of God over their life. So wherever they are, they know they can bring the kingdom of God. If it's their job or their hobby or sports club, whatever it may be, even in their homes, the kingdom of God may be seen or heard in new ways.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I know that that's happening, and I know as that happens, because God promised it, that healthy things grow and multiply. That's just kingdom principle. Healthy things always grow, and there's a lot of health and joy here. That's the other thing. We haven't talked about it, but I'll just share this, is that when Tina and I travel around and we teach and train, and we're with a body of people, a community like this, we can always kind of take the temperature. Is this a community of grace, or is this law? Are people all nervous about rules and doing it right and never want to speak up, or they don't want to ask a question, or they're afraid of making a mistake? This is such a community of grace. Yeah. You guys have done a wonderful job, not just you and Guile, but others. It's really beautiful, and people are at peace. And sure, they have questions, and they're counting the cost of some of the things we were talking about really fully becoming an oikos.
Yeah.
Not just training times and discipling times, but be really filling out that whole family life on mission. But it's been so free and so beautiful, just like the kids were. And so I'm so encouraged. Healthy things grow. They always do.
Awesome.
And thanks for taking a little bit of time to talk about this and share this stuff, because I'd have to figure out how to recreate all that Tina and I experienced this week, So at least our friends here get to hear some of it, right?
Yeah.
So let's real time the big three. What would be the big three things? I'm going to do the first one because I got it, okay?
Okay.
You be thinking about it for a second. What would be the big three things that we wouldn't want people to miss from either our discussion today or even maybe something we wished we'd said, okay?
Okay, yeah.
The first one I'd say, because I was thinking about it when you said it to me the other day. You said that you read something that said, the Pratt book, right? Radical?
Yeah.
Either go start a movement, or join one.
Yeah.
And I thought about that after you said that to me, and you just said it again today as we were talking. And I would say that's one of the big things. Don't miss that. I know that's a strong call, but I was thinking about that, I think in the shower or something after you said it to me the next day. And I was thinking of man, I want to put that kind of call on people, hey, pray and ask God to show you what needs to get started where you're at. Don't be shy and afraid. You have the power that raised Christ from the dead living in you. Or join something.
Yeah.
But don't sit on the sidelines. Right? Don't sit on the sidelines. Get in the game. You got to get in there. So that'd be my first one.
Yeah.
That'd be one of the big threes. Either start something, and you can't officially start a movement, but you know what I mean. I know what you meant by that and what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Or join something that's healthy and growing and making disciples and get into a community like that.
Yeah.
That'd be the first one. What do you think? What's another big takeaway?
Yeah. What I immediately think about is don't overthink it. You don't need to have a program to start making disciples. Don't overthink it. Just grab some people that you find, okay, we have some common interests in, and I have suddenly an access to their life, and obviously they have access to my life. You can start discipling them. Speak truth in their life, because, man, the gospel is such good news.
Yeah.
So people need good news.
Yeah, exactly.
So not overthinking
in
it.
every area of life. And I know, right, people hear that and go well, what curriculum should I use? And that's not what you're talking about.
No.
You're talking about helping them move from unbelief to belief in light of the good news of the gospel in everything. So just start doing that. It's amazing what God will do through that. Even without loads of curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah, if the persecuted church can do it in Iran or Afghanistan or China, I mean, why would we overthink?
Yeah, we don't need to.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily make it better. In fact, it usually doesn't, right? Great. What would be the third thing of the big three today? What do you think that you wouldn't want people to miss?
Everybody is looking for family. So, especially after COVID, people got forced to be isolated.
Yeah.
And even though we don't have any restrictions here now, and I don't think anywhere in the world, people are still isolating themselves. So the hunger for a family and a community is bigger than ever. You said it in one of the sessions, but COVID was good news for the church. I mean, it exposed the church for all its programs and everything that had to be shut down. But also, now we're coming out of it.
People are saying we really need to be doing this in real life, in our homes, and be the church more. I know.
You can't make disciples over text or Zoom. So people need a family and a community. God said it's not good for man to be alone, and it still isn't. So people are so hungry for community. So get out there, get involved with your neighbors, or even if you have kids, try to be involved with the other parents into your kids' lives.
Yeah.
God is so good and gracious. He's going to do amazing
He
things.
really is. Perfect. Well, there's your big three for this week. You can always get the big three as a download, except maybe today. I don't know if I'll be able to summarize this for you. I'll see how it goes in post. I'm traveling, so I wanted to be able to talk to you and share what's going on. And I know you're going to be encouraged by this talk today, but you can always get the big three by going to everydaydisciple.com/big three. Maybe it'll be there or not, but otherwise go ahead and go to that, and it'll take you to a page, and you'll get all the big three downloads, probably including this. I'll try to figure out my best to summarize it. Otherwise, a whole bunch of the other big threes will be there. All right? And be sure to join us next week. We're going to continue to talk about these things. I'm going on the road some more, Tina and I are, and we're going to stay in touch and keep talking about how the gospel speaks good news into everyday life. All right? I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us today. For more information on this show and to get loads of free discipleship resources, visit everydaydisciple.com. And remember, you really can live with the spiritual freedom and relational peace that Jesus promised every day.